Naked Gun 33 and a Third, The Final Insult, was released in 1994. This is directed by Peter Segal, written by Pat Proft, David Zucker, and Robert Lukash. And we have a cast including, of course, Leslie Nielsen as Frank Drebin. And this is the third and final with Leslie Nielsen. I'm now caught up and looking forward to the new one, which is, I think, out now, actually. And in general, I didn't mind this. It wasn't a bad film. In fact, it's a very good film. But interestingly for me, I found it to be less funny than the previous two, but the narrative as a concept appealed to me a lot more. So it was quite a different experience. Drebin goes undercover in a prison to find out the plans of Rocco Dillon, who is a bomber and planning to, plant a bomb. And I liked the concept. I thought it was really fascinating. I thought the location was really fascinating, and I went into it thinking this was going to be my favourite of the three because the story appealed to me the most. But the narrative is very slow. But that being said, maybe the other two are quite slow as well, but I wasn't that bothered about the narratives. The other two films are so funny, but I didn't care for the stories. I wasn't bothered about the stories, whereas this one, I was really invested in the narrative, and I don't think the film was as funny. So maybe it just felt slower than the other two because of that, but certainly either way, the pacing could have been quite a lot better. It is still funny. It's still very well written. It's very clever. We have some brilliant line deliveries, and in general, it is a good film. But it's still not as good as the previous two. Maybe my expectations were higher, but I also still think it's definitely not as funny as the other two films. But that being said, it still works well. If I'd never seen the other two, which, by the way, you don't need to watch them in order, I think that would be a better experience. But in theory, you could watch this one, understand what's going on. If this was the first one that I'd seen, I probably would have found it to be really, really funny. But I know that the other two films were just a little bit more amusing, so it could have been better. But ultimately, apart from being a little slow, I can't really fault it. We have some really brilliant performances as well, and I really enjoyed it. If you loved the first two, I think you'll really like this. If you didn't care for the first two, then part of me wants to say you might still like this because of the narrative, but as I said, the narrative is very slow, so maybe not. But if you're a fan of the other two films, absolutely give this one a go. I thought Naked Gun 33 and a Third, while not quite as good as the previous two, had a more interesting narrative. Yes, it was slow, but it was more interesting, and it was still funny. It was still very funny. It's just that the previous two films are just fabulously funny. This one, quite amusing. Looking forward to the next one. I don't know, I haven't read too much about it. I try to not read much about films until I watch them, just to avoid spoilers. But I don't know if they're planning on rebooting it, if they're just going to do one, if they're going to wait and see how well it's received. I don't know. But part of me thinks there's just... I can't imagine it being as funny as the first two films. I can't imagine it being as funny as this one. So time will tell. Looking forward to watching it. And for now, needless to say, while I don't think it's quite as good as the first two films, Naked Gun 33 and a Third was still an entertaining experience. And if you enjoyed the previous two, then I'd say this is definitely worth watching.